So, as you've heard, my name is Sushila Gaurangi. If you don't know me, now you do. And I see some of my students here as well, so it's like you're never gonna escape me. We literally finished our year last week, so it's like I'm haunting them. So stay attentive because I will call on you. So before we begin today's topic, we will start with a small kirtan, or bhajan rather. So just to keep our intentions set on what we're going to be singing about, this is just a translation for J. Radha Madhav. Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Braja and the holder of the great hill named Govardhan. He is the beloved son of Mother Yashoda and the delighter of the inhabitants of Braja, and he wanders in the forests along the banks of the river Yamuna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari and then we'll transition into prayers. Just follow along. Om Ajnana Tinandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Ladita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hare Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwanusri Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuraya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Alright, before I begin, thank you all for being here and being my audience today. And then I also want to ask for forgiveness in advance, tolerance in advance, as well as understanding in advance if we make any mistakes. And please, I'm open to feedback after the talk as well. So today our topic will be an overview of chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita entitled Devotional Service. So the topic is self-evident at this point, and then I want you to also know when you see icons like this on the slide coming up, I'm expecting audience participation. So just speak up whenever I pose a question or ask. It's not rhetorical, so all right. So let's get started. Super quickly, what is the context, right? So what just happened in chapter 11? The icon is there. Anyone? Sean? Any idea? Chapter 11. Does anyone know what the title is? Yes, universal form. All right, so now that you have the title, what happened in the chapter? Anyone? It doesn't have to be just my kids.
Vishwarup Darshan.
Yes. So essentially what happens is after taking the majority of the chapter to the chapters before, they're asking, Arjuna's asking, okay, you've explained all about your qualities, all about your forms and whatnot, but I want to see your universal form, right? So he makes a request. If you think that I'm able to behold your cosmic form, O my Lord, or Master of all mystic power, then kindly show me that unlimited universal self. And after Krishna gives him divine eyes, he shows his universal form. But then after taking in the form, Arjuna says, that's enough, this is horrifying, but wonderful, but also amazing, but also I'm like really stressed out looking at this, because it's just so much to intake. And even though Krishna gave him transcendental eyes, the divine eyes, so-called, right? This two-handed form, Arjuna finally is able to mentally compose himself. So Krishna instructs him that the form that was just witnessed is not visible through material eyes, of course. And then it can only be understood after studying the Vedas, doing charity, penance, through devotional service, and he can be understood as he is and seen as he is in that form. So then with that, we land in chapter 12, which is named Devotional Service. Then Arjuna presents another question, which are considered to be more perfect. Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. So, at this point, it's important to notice that Arjuna is not asking because he's suddenly inspired to become a Jnana Yogi. He's not attracted by the Brahman all of a sudden just because he got so overwhelmed by the universal form. He's asking to confirm and be sure in his position and be secure in his attachment to the personal form. Because at this point, Arjuna is very attached to the personal form, and that's what he's been showing his devotion and love and care for, right? So, what is the answer to Krishna's question? It is devotional service, right? So devotional service to the personal form of the Lord specifically. So Krishna consciousness is a very personal faith, philosophy, religion, and practice. We are conscious of Krishna, right? So his form, his nature, his lila, and he is a person. And when I say person, that doesn't necessarily equate to being human, which is very material in the sense of human beings like you and I are. A personhood is just someone who has a personality, exists, has likes, wants, desires, things like that. So there's no question of an opinion when he's answering this question. Krishna himself is determining this to be the answer, and that happens immediately in the next verse, so 12.2. So you can repeat after me. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Maya Veshya Manoye Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopetas Teme Yukta Tamamata. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect." So there you have it. That could literally be the end of the talk at this point. We could end right now, but this is only the second verse of the entire chapter, right? So there's the question, there was the answer, and then the rest is inherently an explanation. So let's backtrack a little bit to figure out why we got there, why that is the most perfect. And there's going to be a comparison throughout the chapter between the impersonal practice versus the personal practice, which is also known as bhakti. Right? So His Grace Chaitanya Charan Das, I drew a lot upon his lectures and materials because he's really good at explaining complex topics like this, so I highly recommend you watch his stuff. Has a great way of breaking down the core principles of the impersonal faith or practice and then the personal practice. And he calls it the misdiagnosis of distress. So the question is, what is the cause of my distress and how can I stop it? This question is very common in a lot of religions, a lot of faiths, because it's common to everyone. Everyone experiences distress. No one is permanently happy while they're in this world. So how they address that question is going to differ from faith to faith. So in the very material sense, right, you can attribute distress to unfulfilled desires. I didn't get the grade I wanted, I didn't ace my project, I didn't get the promotion I wanted, I didn't get this, I didn't get that. It's a lot of unfulfilled desires that causes mental distress, right? And when you look at some of the other religions, like Christianity, for example, there is the concept of the original sin. So to put it very broadly, right, the original sin is from painkillers, yeah? Move, just keep moving. Yeah. So what if I'm in pain? Just keep moving. I'm not going to even think about it, right? So all great points. So when we talk about, I'm going to address the not moving one. So when you notice pain in the body, one possible thing you can do is just not move at all. But then what happens when you choose that path? Are you solving this cause of the distress? No. And then you have the other one where you go to a doctor, right? Why do you go to a doctor? Yes, to get a diagnosis, right? To figure out what the cause of that issue is. And then once that cause is resolved, whether it be medication or therapy or a cast, maybe I broke something and I didn't even know about it, then the cause is resolved. And then after that, what can I do freely? Walk, move around, right? So in the path where you're addressing the cause of the distress, then you're able to resume your action, right? Whereas in the case where you just stop all movement, then you're stuck not moving. And you might have some internal like wants and desires of wanting to do other stuff, but now you have to let go of all of that, right? So I want to translate that example into what you're seeing on the screen right now. So impersonalism sees distress as an issue, and then the cause of distress is any desire. So whether it's good, bad, whatever it is, desires are what causes distress, right? And then the end goal becomes eliminating desires so that you can be distress-free. In personalism, or bhakti, right, we go backwards, right? If distress is caused by desires, where do those desires come from? And what are those desires specifically about, right? So the cause of the disease is disconnection from Krishna. So let's start from the other way around right now. So if we start off at the point where we're disconnected from Krishna, that is what the disease or the illness is, right? And because of that disease or illness, we see symptoms of it. The symptoms are misdirected desires. So when I say disconnected from Krishna, it's having any sort of wants or desires that are irrelevant to Krishna, right? So as soon as we start thinking about me, myself, what do I want? What do I want to do? What do I want for me? Then it's misdirected desires, because Krishna is no longer in the picture. So whenever you have misdirected desires specifically, then that is what causes distress in our lives right now, right? So the question becomes, what is a healthy desire? So the nature of desire, what is a healthy desire? So I mentioned before that the cause of misdirected desires is what? The disconnection from Krishna, which only applies as long as Krishna is involved, it is a healthy desire. But there's also cases where this can go into extremes. For example, if I have a quote-unquote healthy desire of wanting to donate to my temple, right? I want to make millions of dollars and donate it to my temple so they can buy a building. But in order to pursue that desire, now I'm giving up my nights, my weekends, working overtime, and that's affecting my chanting, my sadhana, my relationships with other devotees. Is that a healthy desire? No.
Yes.
For
For sure, you give millions.
Yes, but then in a sense, when you get lost in the pursuing of that desire, there is a greater risk. Like the bigger the desire, the greater the risk you run of getting further away from Krishna. So even if you start out with the goal of, yes, I'm raising money for Krishna, if you get lost in like the logistics, the hows, and getting further and further away from your personal practice, from other people, anything that connects you to Krishna, then that becomes an unhealthy desire. All right, so you have to manage your desires well enough, make sure that they're realistic in the sense that you don't lose any other like connection to Krishna, even more than we might have already had, right? And then another thing is the fulfillment of desires versus the fulfillment of what your heart wants, right? So in the material level, right, you can have as many desires as you want, but does fulfilling those desires guarantee happiness? Usually not. Yeah. So as soon as you accomplish one thing, you're looking for the next thing. You're looking to do it better. You're looking to go above and beyond, right? You're never fully satisfied with whatever you accomplish or fulfill, right? So on the spiritual level, which do you think is more important? Heart or desire? Heart, right? So in the case of having spiritualized goals, quote unquote, having a desire that is focused on Krishna, right? Even if you don't meet that goal, meet that desire per se, there is still satisfaction and fulfillment in the fact that you're doing it for Krishna, right? So the underlying motive, whenever you're having goals oriented around Krishna, having desires oriented around Krishna, you're making sure that you keep Krishna in the center, and you realize that regardless of if it goes really well or really bad, Krishna had a part for me to play, and I did my best to play that part, right? So that is the main driving goal or driving intent that should be there. So we talk a lot about desire. How do those desires arise? Namely, Nam, Rupa, Guna, Lila, right? So those four things are how we recognize something by name, how they look, their qualities, or their pastimes or activities. Any of those things that might seem attractive or desirable can lead to us having a desire for it, right? So it could be someone we know doing something really cool, or maybe we read about something, or any ways that we perceive things. If something feels attractive, then there's an inherent possibility to get a desire related to that, right? So in how we want to relate this back to the impersonalist perspective is these four components or features of possible things cause desires, right? And the goal of impersonalists is to have no desires. So if we want no desires, we need to get rid of the causes of desires, right? Nam, Rupa, Guna, Lila. So then if you consider all four features to be Maya or illusion, then we're set. We're done. That's the end, right? So it's tough to kind of wrap your head around this because we as humans are predispositioned to describe everything, observe everything. Our perception is very much oriented around these four features, right? When I say think about something, you're either going to think about the name, what it looks like, what it does, or what it can do, things like that, right? So if I say think of an elephant, but don't think about what it looks like, what it could do, what the elephant word looks like, anything, it is very, very difficult to do that, right? In fact, impossible. But when you translate that into what the goal of an impersonalist is, that's why the impersonalist path is so difficult and so tedious, because it is so impossible for our human brains to kind of grasp that concept, right? So grasping the concept becomes very difficult, and then the actual practice of meditating on nothingness is also very difficult, right? Because if the goal is to think about nothing, thinking is something that you have to do, but in order to think about nothing, like how do you do that, right? So thinking itself is an action, but you want to do nothing, but also be nothing, but then it's a lot. So the more even I went into it, the more confused I got, and I was like, this is why people say stop, like, before you get too deep into the impersonalist philosophy, right? So that is the nature of distress. So we're gonna go into personalism now. So when I say personalism, I'm referring to bhakti from here on forth. So in opposition to the complexity and the tediousness that impersonalism provides, bhakti is very accommodating and very flexible for everyone. Bhakti is meant for everyone wherever they are. So the four levels that are broadly explained within the chapter are labeled here. We're going to go from top to bottom. So level 1, Krishna says, let your mind and intelligence be absorbed in Krishna, right? So at this level, devotees at this level, like this is very like unintentional, right? This comes naturally to them. They are every moment, every second thinking about Krishna, thinking about what they could do for Krishna. He is the front and center of everything happening in their lives, right? So for many of us, this is difficult and we're kind of like working towards it or hoping to get there one day, right? Level 2 is something that a lot of us are probably currently practicing, is letting our mind be fixed on Krishna through intentional efforts. So this is whenever we do intentional sadhana or seva to direct our mind and its thoughts towards Krishna, right? So that could be hearing, chanting, worshiping, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Arjanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So all those 9 devotional processes are considered in the category of level 2 because we're intentionally seeking out certain activities and reorienting ourselves to think about Krishna. So this is a practice that needs to be developed and maintained, right? So if you find yourself, getting distracted, for example, during japa, right? if you start getting yourself distracted and you're like going way off track of what you're thinking, you're supposed to be focusing on, right? A very common tactic is redirection, right? Find a way to link back what you're thinking about back to Krishna. You know, how can you relate it back to Krishna? It's that constant exercise of bringing it back to Krishna that is the epitome of level 2, right? Level 3 is offering your efforts through your work and seva. This is more of a physical sense. So level 2 is engaging your mind, and sometimes your body too. Level 3 is focused on body. Controlling the mind and engaging your mind is a very difficult thing for people to do. And if that is not within your capability or it's not practical for you, it is also acceptable for you to offer your efforts through physical work. So that could be, you know, setting up the center, cleaning up, serving prasadam, like anything that involves using your body. Because using your body is categorically more easy to do than mental seva, right? And then we also have level 4. For those who can't even offer to participate in level 3, either due to like family restrictions, social restrictions, you know, bodily restrictions, Krishna instructs you to work for some higher cause that cultivates some level of selflessness, right? So this includes any type of service, quote-unquote service, for any type of cause that is beneficial to others, right? So this could be like pro bono work, this could be community service, this could be national service, you know, joining the government related stuff, or serving in your military and like working for your nation, things like that. So any sort of activity that inspires a little bit of selflessness is better than nothing. Because the reason why this is still acceptable is because doing this type of work for higher causes will eventually lead to the development of your consciousness and your mentality, right? Selflessness is such an important characteristic to develop, and once you start working on that characteristic, your consciousness expands and you're going to be more open to welcoming other things into your life, right? So that's why those 4 levels are kind of the main ones that are emphasized in this chapter. There's obviously different variations. I mean, people aren't going to be strictly level 2 or level 3. It's probably a combination. So the point here is that bhakti doesn't work in absolutes. It's not level 1 or go to hell, right? So as the saying goes, from your place, at your pace, access Krishna's grace. So the existence of these levels show that bhakti has a place for everyone, right? So the key thing is to maintain and grow your efforts and your connection to Krishna through whatever you're able to do, physically or mentally or any other way, right? Because by dedicating your practice, you're going to be able to offer your heart to Him and gradually work on developing that connection even more. So a good portion of this chapter covers qualities that endear devotees to Krishna, right? So once again, Chaitanya Prabhu does this really good graphic to kind of explain the intersection between devotion and virtues, and we can also refer to them as bhakti and dharma, right? So when we look at the top, we're gonna think, yes, they have devotion, no devotion, having virtues, not having virtues, right? And we're going to go through the different quadrants that are possible. So in the best quadrant, right, we have people or devotees who have devotion. Let's go with people. People who have devotion and have virtues, right? So this is the best quadrant to be in, because this is what Krishna really loves seeing in people. Having devotion, but also having virtues or qualities of dharma in them, right? And then we have the third corner, I didn't number them, but basically this corner, right? So this is no devotion and no virtues. This category is basically considered demoniac, right? So this is going to be the worst category to be in. So the other two are a little bit more interesting. So next up we have the having virtues but no devotion. People who first come to mind in this category are atheists. So why Prabhu says unsustainable is the reasoning or the philosophy or lack of philosophy behind atheism, right? So when atheists provide the argument that you can be good without religion, the ability or the intention or the driving force behind them doing good in the world or having good virtues isn't because of their atheism, it's in spite of it. So atheism is a lack of a philosophical religious framework, right? There's no belief in a higher power, a higher governing power, or just God in general, right? So there's nothing preventing them from being a good person, but at the same time, there's nothing preventing them from being a bad person, right? So when you're generally considered a good person, but you have no devotional background or religious background, you can usually attribute those tendencies to be selflessness, selfless, to be good, to be kind, everything, to either behaviors that they've carried over from their previous lives, behaviors that they've learned in their childhood from their parents or well-meaning mentors, things like that, right? So it's all very environmental, like nurture and nature, right? But then on the flip side, it's just as easy for people who fall into the atheist category to not ascribe to traditional virtues. There's nothing necessarily stopping them mentally from being a bad person, right, other than their upbringing. So if they had a bad upbringing, they're more likely to, flip that switch, right? So that's why staying in this category is very unsustainable, because at times your mentality can become unpredictable. You might be a good person, but there's always a breaking point in terms of finances or, just people around you, things like that, right? So the last category is having devotion but no virtues. If they're in this, they tend to be categorized as the most problematic. Devotion is very useful in the material world and the spiritual world, but if you do not have virtues, especially while you're here on earth, you're going to be causing chaos, right? Because the point of virtue is to maintain order and peace on earth, in your communities, in your families, everything you interact with, right? So if a person is a really good devotee, but they have a tendency to run red lights all the time, the only thing that's going to come out of it is people dying, car accidents, or higher insurance rates, right? So it's not great. At this point, they also become a liability to their community and their faiths, because if you have a really bad personality and you're kind of like arrogant or mean or anything like that, you give a bad name to the people you represent, right? So they're also a liability in that sense. It's important to note that Krishna, by principle, accepts everyone who offers him devotion, right? So that does include both these categories at the top. But the people that are dear to Krishna are those that develop virtues as well as their devotion, right? Krishna himself appears on earth to establish dharma, so why would he not show preference and appreciation for the devotees who are also trying to do the same thing, right? In terms of specific qualities, right, so Chaitanya Charitamrita mentions 26 ones. I'm not going to read through all of them, but they're quite expansive. Some of them are very difficult to attain, I feel like. I believe there's one that's don't agitate others and don't be agitated. Definitely bad at that one, you can ask my mom. But all of these qualities fall into virtues. And I think the thing we need to notice is all of these aren't necessarily devotional in nature, right? So all of these kind of fall into a behavioral category rather than a devotional category. So when you have a job interview, right, you get two types of questions, behavioral and technical. Technical have to do with the skill set you're saying you have about the role you're coming in for, right? Very specific to the things you've studied. Behavioral questions have more to do with how you interact with other people, how you interact in scenarios of conflict, how you address bad behaviors in other people, things like that. And honestly, I've seen people fail interviews just because they were terrible at their behavioral questions, right? So technical and behavioral are almost weighted equally in most job interviews, at least where I am. And then we want to translate that a little bit into devotional versus behavioral qualities or virtues, right? So devotional qualities will have more to do with specific to your sadhana, your seva, how well can you wash a pot? How well do you do arti properly by the rules and regulations? How do you Do you get up for Mangalarti all the time? Do you, right? So all of those things are very specific to sadhana and like devotional practice, right? The behavioral virtues that we've been talking about that endear us to Krishna are more behavioral, right? Are you kind? Are you humble? Are you level-headed? Do you make sure to not agitate others? Do you do this and that? It's all very much related to how we relate to other people around us, right? So making sure we're working on the behavioral qualities, and noticing what we might be lacking in is very, very important because Krishna also values this. Behavior is kind of the easiest way to make an impression on people. It's the first gate, it's the first thing that people notice. They won't notice your philosophical knowledge, they won't notice how much you know, they'll notice how you behave around them, right? And sometimes if you're not on your best behavior, that kind of ruins your chances of connecting with that person as well. So purports throughout this chapter kind of mention the same qualities over and over again, but this is just to emphasize how important different qualities are and how important it is the devotee must acquire these qualifications, right? So one who wants to be recognized as a devotee should be having these qualities, right? And then, but the flip side is the 26 that we saw before, like you don't need to make like a 10-year plan to tackle each one of them and make sure you like hit 100% efficiency and like, I want to be the most humble person in 3 years kind of thing. Like that's not really sustainable or possible. And it's not recommended because the easiest way to make sure you develop all those qualities is doing devotional service, right? So through your service, you're able to tackle these qualities and those naturally arise in you, right? So for example, one of my services is Sunday school teacher, right? Does anyone want to guess the qualities that really arise when you're a Sunday school teacher?
Tolerance.
Tolerance, yes. What else?
Patience.
Patience, yeah. Anything else? Sean, you got anything? Nothing? It's okay. You're the cause of a lot of my development. I'm kidding. All the kids are. But yeah. So yeah, a lot of tolerance, a lot of patience. I recommend anyone who wants to develop those qualities to take over for me as a Sunday school teacher. You will become humble in an instant. You will become tolerant in an instant. It's really great for character development. Yeah. So that's also kind of relevant to some of the points. So basically, like even though it's not recommended to tackle individual qualities one by one, it is also something you can do if you notice yourself, lacking like severely in certain qualities. Maybe you're more prone to anger, or you can't like tolerate difficult situations easily. That's something you should and can address with trusted mentors, senior disciples, or people in the community that you can reach out to, because sometimes you want to aid the process of doing devotional service along with work along the side to develop or fix or address any issues that you're seeing in your own behavior, right? In a general sense, also shout out therapy, if you want to go to a therapist as well, I highly recommend that, because doing your efforts is what pleases Krishna, right? You shouldn't only depend on Krishna to fix the issue. You have to show I'm doing the work, I'm putting my work in, I'm doing my part, right? So definitely take care of that when you it's always a good practice to self-assess yourself, right? Every once in a while, check in with yourself, see where you're at, if you're seeing problem spots, try to make some moves to, address that. So, right, do we need to have every single quality that kind of relates to what I just said before? You don't have to, it's not a checklist, but it all naturally arises as soon as you work on kind of perfecting and really driving in on the devotional service you're committing to, right? So, we're gonna do, what time is it? 6:30? Yeah, okay. So we're going to do a quick recap. So first question, what are the causes of distress in impersonalist philosophy? Let's start with that one.
Desires.
Which kind of desires?
Everything.
All desires, yes. And then what is the cause of distress in personalist or bhakti philosophy?
Disconnecting away from Krishna.
Disconnection.
Being disconnected from Krishna, which results in what kind of desires? Misdirected desires. There we go. All right. What are the 4 features that can cause desires to arise? Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela. There we go. And then last thing, the most dear to Krishna are those with blank and blank. Devotion and virtue. Yes, there we go. How do we best develop endearing behavior qualities? Say it louder. Devotional service. There we go. All right. So with that, we have a conclusion. So don't try to fully understand the person's philosophy. It's a winding black hole, and
Yes.
it's not worth it. Because as soon as you try to start understanding it, you'll get sucked into it, and then it becomes something that like haunts you, and then you can't let go of it, and then that's just the trap of it, right? And then all you need to know is that trying to follow the like merge with the Brahman and like meditate on the Brahman, it's a very, very difficult path, and the end result is always not guaranteed at all. So why kind of waste your efforts on something that isn't guaranteed? And it's also very difficult, right? Then we have following the path of bhakti, making sure it fits your capabilities and the practicality of your situation as well. But regardless of whatever you choose to follow, to whatever degree you follow bhakti, make sure you dedicate yourself properly, right? Don't get wishy-washy with it and like overcommit or undercommit. You know, make sure you're doing something that is proper for what you're able to do. As for the many virtues that we kind of glanced over, right? Don't be overly concerned with developing each one of them singularly. By practicing Krishna consciousness properly and doing devotional service, you'll naturally gain these qualities, right? And then, of course, not to say, like, if you're noticing certain pitfalls in yourself and your psyche, try to address it before it gets worse, right? And then Krishna also states in the purport, right? He who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga, right? So devotional service is the most direct path we have to Krishna, right? All the other ones might get you there eventually, but they're difficult, they're winding, they might take you backwards, not as direct, right? So what Krishna recommends, even though he discusses all these different levels and he also goes over impersonalism, that in no way is a suggestion for us to pursue those options just to see what it's all about, right? So Krishna recommends to Arjuna devotional service, and that is a recommendation to all of us in Kali Yuga because it is the easiest and most practical path to take forward, right? So that being said, devotional service, once you're engaged in it, it is only natural you seek instruction to make sure you're doing it properly, right? And that means you're taking shelter of a guru, of senior devotees, making sure you're engaged properly, right? Because this isn't a solitary practice, this is in a community with other people, right? And then, making sure you're serving according to regulations, right? Sorry. The conclusion here is that Krishna consciousness is a holistic process, right? It addresses many different aspects of your life with minimum effort compared to the other paths that are possible out there. You're addressing your mind, your body, your psyche, your emotional state, everything through the devotional service that you're doing, right? So instead of tackling each of these different things one at a time or going off in one direction, focusing only on one particular thing, it is best to engage in Krishna consciousness and take care of your entire self in one go. So with that, I'll end. Thank you. If you have any questions or follow-up clarifications, please jump in. If I said anything not right, please correct it. But thank you so much for your time and attention.
Do you want to progress the question?
Don't make the question difficult. Kidding.
Hare Krishna Mantra, wonderful class. Thank you very much. Question within devotion. devotional service, one to become a better devotee. With so many different devotional services one can offer, what do you think with your experience is the easiest and the best devotional service one can offer to Krishna?
Thank you for that question, for making the comments. I think the easiest devotional service you can do is something you're interested in. I think the phrase for like, if you're doing what you love, like you're never working a day kind of thing, I don't fully 100% agree with that because it's still work. But in terms of devotional service, I can say doing what interests you and what you're finding your passion in is really good. Of course, there are services that need to be done and we need to support them as well. But finding what really appeals to you and your tendencies is a great way to keep yourself interested and involved in keeping Krishna consciousness fun for you, right? So whether that probably means you would have to dabble in a couple of services if you're not sure about which one speaks to you the most. Do like a rotation, try to do as many different services as possible, see what really sticks to you the most, and run along with it. The community here is so helpful, and like, if anyone's struggling to find a service that really speaks to them, like definitely reach out, branch out, try more things. I hope that answers. Okay.
The most easiest service, devotional service, is chanting of the holy names. It doesn't take any effort.
Yes.
But chanting is also devotional service because you're serving Krishna and chanting his names. The other part that you mentioned is true in the beginning. Service that you're inclined to do, what you like to do. But as you mature in Krishna consciousness, it's not what I like to do, it's what my seniors, my Shiksha Guru, my Diksha Guru, what my mentors want me to do. That's where the real maturity. Otherwise, it becomes a havoc because everybody wants to, let's say, do the same of serving Prashadam. I like to do, but if I don't get that, then I won't do. So as we grow, it has to be like Prabhupada. There were many devotees who Prabhupada engaged them in services which they were really not wanting to. But Prabhupada saw their capacity, saw that they have those skill set or they can do it. So sometimes an individual may not see what they can do, which others can see. So we have to very much Krishna conscious about submitting to our seniors and devotees. Material life is, if I'm the boss, I'm the boss. Nobody submits if they don't pay them. If you're getting a salary, you submit to them. But here, there's no salary. So the real humility comes from that. Following instructions of the acharyas, of the senior devotees.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. You made a wonderful presentation. I have some disagreement.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, fully ready.
So, Pandari, you mentioned that the devotional service and no virtue, right? So actually, if you look at the scriptures, right? If you look at the Apiche, that verse 9.30, right? Apiche Sudurachara. You can share over here, right? Bhajate ma ananyabha. Sadhu Reva Samavillame. I think 9.30, Bhagavad Gita. We can do on the Veda ways, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are many verses throughout Bhagavatam also. I'll share two of them. So how do you reconcile this part, right? Api chesu durachaya, that's the one. Api chesu durachaya, bhajate ma ananyava. Sadhureva samantanya, samedya sikronisam. We can get the translation, right? Even if one commits the most abnormal action, if he is engaged in the devotional space, to be considered simply because he is properly situated in his determination. So he has no virtues. Like whatever you say, he is very much disabled in terms of mentally and physically. He is doing so much nonsense. But Krishna said that even the most abominable, I consider that to be virtuous. Right? So this and that similar verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam also. 5.18.12. Yashyasti bhakti, right? Yashyasti bhakti bhagavatyadhyachana sare sudhaistatva sama sati sura avatashyatto adna moradena satidha. Would you like to read the translation, please?
Yeah, sure. All the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, enunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service and engaged in material activities has no good qualities, even if he is adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives. He must be driven by his own mental speculations and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. How can there be any good qualities in such a man?
So, in essence, the devotional service means all the qualities. That's what So, how would you read this language? Like what you presented, like somebody has a devotee but has so many faults, is actually most problematic, but it is not. And devotional service would actually eventually get him out of all those troubles. What to speak of most above the earth. And here is that actually one has the devotional service, he has all the good qualities.
Thank you, Ruth. Just to clarify, when I said problematic, I meant in a societal sense, just because of possible distress they might cause to other people, right? So the traffic example, like they might be devotional, but there's the cause of causing harm to others, right? And there's also the notion of people who are religious but don't necessarily have the greatest of intentions, right? Whether you see that in like corrupt priests or practitioners, people who like try to swindle people out of money, that kind of thing. Yes, they're devotional, but they also cause distress to other people, right? So that was my angle on the problematic behavior part. Yeah, thank you, Bhagavad.
Question?
Hare Krishna,
Yes, sir.
Very nice class. So now this question is for Mahavachandra Prabhuji.
Okay.
So he answered that in the verse it's written, the most abominable person, like if he does devotional service, is considered most sacred, right?
Yes.
I would like to hear from Mahavachandra Prabhuji an example of a verse where most abominable person in devotional service and most saintly. Can you share some example? Can you share one? Example from? Thank you so much. I was just trying to point out. I think what you mentioned is very correct. But in general, devotional service actually makes everything clear. Even what to speak of sincere devotional service, even chanting unknowingly, one actually gets free of all reactions. And obviously, see, when we think about talking about other people getting suffered because of us, fundamentally, nobody suffers because of no one else. And if that's the case, where is the justice? That means either the Lord is not powerful enough or he doesn't have a sense of compassion or justice. Right? Somebody like you are a teacher and you cannot control your children. Either you don't have that power or you don't have that understanding that somebody is abusing someone. Because Supreme Lord has no fault and he's actually most compassionate. So nobody in this world suffers because of anyone else. Bottom line, it may look like that somebody is giving me so difficult time, but they are just the messengers. They are not in real sense, they don't give me, because actually the trouble comes from my mind. Basically, anything good, bad, or happening, fundamental, when something is bad is happening, it is not because of anyone else, it's my own. So that's to answer your question, how to justify if somebody else is suffering. Like they say, and the other, that what, Prabhu is saying. So that Acharya has given so much elaborate commentary on this one. How could somebody do nonsense when he's unallowed devotees, right? So when Krishna is speaking about this, he actually has his most topmost gopis in his heart. From worldly standard point of view, people can say this is most above thing. A married woman goes to the middle of the night to another man, right? Living up all feeling everything, right? From worldly standard point, it has no kind of harm. But their devotion actually kind of has this blemishes is actually become their So I think that makes sense, right? When Krishna is speaking, actually he's thinking about his devotee, because this is the most confidential chapter. So that's what it is. And actually, they see them in the South India, the Srinagar temple. It is actually built by 4 dacoits. They were actually sadhus. So when they went over there, they became so much upset that nobody was worshipping Lord. So they went to all the villagers and said, please help us, please help. They had the money for everything, but not for the Lord. So these sadhus said they were yogis. So each of them had very great quality. So like somebody can catch your shadow, somebody can walk on the water, somebody can lock anything. Those kind of a great qualities. Somebody can talk to you and you can completely lost. So then they started systematically looting the people. They will in the daytime, they will go, they will make all the kind of analysis, who has what not. In the night time, somebody will open the keys, do all this, and they started collecting money. So what happened? When they went to the business, they met the professionals. They said, why don't you join our team? So these sadhus say, okay, let's do the business together. And so they were professional robbers, and they started looting left and right. So after that, they collected so much wealth, enormous wealth. Then these professionals said, now let's share our part of the wealth. So they have said, okay, we have stored everything in an island on a river. So let's go over there. So when they went over there, actually the boat has a hole. So in the middle of the boat sank in the river, Godavari river. Everybody on the boat sank in the water, and the sadhu who had the captivity he was ready to keep him not working. So they killed that people also. But in order to glorify Lord Sri Ranganath Ji, they say because if we keep them alive, they will keep looting it. If we give them the wealth, they will do more nonsense. They must, because now their hard work will go towards Ranganath, let them kill. Right? This is the most abominable action. Looting people, killing people, but then they didn't use anything for them. Not a single penny out of that act of thievery or stealing or killing. They get everything for Ranganath. So it's one of the biggest temple in the. So this is the most abominable action, but they are doing it for devotees. This is kind of Acharyas give us examples. Nanadev Prabhu.
Thank you, Sushila Gaurangi.
No, just a friendly reminder, the system of karma is very hard for us to get an insight to, so don't go ahead with something that might be harmful to others thinking they had it coming or they did something to you previously. Just be careful with that. Did anyone have any last questions, or she'll be more with you? Or we can do it after if we're running late?
After that.
Okay, we'll talk after. Thank you.
Without Guru, please thank you, Sushila Gaurangi Devi. Everyone can take a line on Prashadam. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Mahaprashadi Govinde Namaha Vaishnave Sutta Punya Vadana